Inscryption is a very weird game. I've heard nothing but praise about this game since its release a couple of years back, and I always wanted to try it. But I just couldn't see myself getting gripped in a card game. I never really took to Gwent either, I know, shoot me. But I knew there was something else. I knew there was another layer. I had been told that this game wasn't just a card game, and it was this other layer that I had no idea what it was, that kept eating away at the back of my mind. I love games with a creative edge, that pull the rug from underneath you. And that's exactly what this game does. I'm so glad that I played it, and I feel that Inscryption is that good, that it begs the question, is Inscryption the greatest indie game of all time? This video will contain spoilers, but not yet. I will give a spoiler warning beforehand, so just keep that in mind, you won't be able to miss it. Inscryption is a game where you wake up in some random cabin in the middle of the woods, and a shadowy figure on the other side of the table forces you to play a role-playing card game with him. A card PG, if you will. No? Okay, let's move on. The card game is much deeper than I thought. On a base level, you have a deck of cards, and a separate deck of squirrels. Each card has two values, attack points and defense points. You place your cards on the table, and if there is a card in front of it, it will deal damage to that card on your turn. If there is no card in front of it, it will do damage to the other player. Same for the opponent's turn, but in reverse. In order to use your cards, you will need to sacrifice other cards, which is where the squirrels come in. You can put a squirrel down to either take a hit of damage from the opponent, or use it as a sacrifice to play a stronger card from your deck. Whoever deals a certain amount of damage to tip the weighing scales on the left side of the screen all the way over to the other end, wins the game. It sounds simple enough so far, with enough strategy involved to keep you interested in playing. At this stage, the game is a roguelite, where upon death, your character is transformed into a card, and seemingly a new challenger takes your place, but the card of your previous character enters your deck. There's a lot more going on here though. Some of your cards start talking to you, they come up with a plan to escape, and you're encouraged to complete puzzles around the cabin in order to gain more information as to how to ultimately defeat the Dungeon Master, as it doesn't seem beating him at cards will be enough. There's other layers that slowly ramp up the creepiness, such as certain items you can use to give you a short-term advantage. For example, you can receive a pair of pliers. That will give you an advantage in the game, but you probably won't expect it to do what it does. At this point, I think I've probably said too much already, so from this point onwards there will be spoilers from the rest of the game. If it looks like something you'd be interested in, go play it. I think you should, because it's fantastic. If you're not bothered about spoilers or you've played it before, then let's get moving. Once you beat the Dungeon Master and take a picture of him using the camera instead of him taking a picture of you using the camera, he himself then becomes a card, and you're then treated to some found footage of a card opening YouTuber stumbling across this hidden card game in the woods called Inscryption. There's very creepy undertones to all of this, but then you go back to playing the game, except this time, instead of a creepy cabin, you're now playing Inscryption presented as an old school RPG, with pixelated graphics as you explore this new world you've been thrusted into. The rules of the game have changed somewhat, but I have to say, this was easily my favourite iteration of the game. It's not as deep as the others, but I just had a lot more fun with it. Although, I must admit, the difficulty drops rapidly in this section. It is very easy. You can even farm an insta-win card here if you want to cheese the game, and it's very easy to do. You'll also learn a lot more about the four beings behind this devil card game, and you must battle all four in order to progress the game. It turns out, your talking cards from the first version of the game were the other three beings, and upon completion of Act 2, your old friend Sturt decides to take control of the game, and you're then sentenced to the hardest, yet most satisfying version of the game for Act 3. But not before more found footage, which shows the YouTuber is now in danger as a result of finding this Inscryption game. A woman turns up at his house, essentially demanding he return the game, but he claims ignorance, despite his life very clearly being implied to have been in danger now. But he's too far down the rabbit hole to turn back now. But it's time for Act 3. The Dark Souls of the card PG genre, if you will, not because of its crushing difficulty, but because that's just how it's structured. You're dropped into a map and must travel from checkpoint to checkpoint. If you lose a battle, you respawn from your last checkpoint and must travel back to where you died in order to retrieve your money. However, you keep your deck regardless. This version of the game operates on an energy system, where the more powerful a card, the more energy it costs to play. You earn energy as the battle goes on, and I don't know if I'm just a bit slow or something, but it took me quite a while to get used to this. But I must say, once it clicked, this is arguably the most tactical the game ever is. It was a great time. Deck building is the most important it's ever been, but once you've beaten all the bosses in the third act, you are essentially done. You now delete the game, and as each file is being destroyed, you play various iterations of Inscryption with each of the 4 beings, and it made me somewhat emotional. All these people want to do is just play cards, man. The game then ends with our main character getting ended in our final batch of found footage. How incredibly traumatic. I mean, me personally, if I found an ancient game in the woods and the creators of said game sent someone to threaten me over it, I would just give it back to them, but hey, different strokes and all that. But now, to harken back to the title of the video, is Inscryption the best indie game of all time? It's certainly one of the most creative, that's for sure. People generally have a tendency to overrate pieces of media with a meta-narrative, as this game does, due to the fact they believe it to be quirky and experimental, when this isn't always the case. Meta-narrative stopped being quirky and experimental in and of itself around 10 years ago. It's how you surround that meta-narrative that really counts. It's the tone. It's how the meta aspect is presented. In Inscryption, it's presented brilliantly. It's not all in your face about it. It's just a very good meta-narrative based game, without coming across as corny. The card games in each act are genuinely so fleshed out and engaging that even without all the meta stuff, I'd have happily played any of these games for ages. It's that good. Inscryption could have survived as a standard card PG, but they wanted that edge, that hook, to get people like me through the door. As much fun as the card games were, it wouldn't have been enough to initially entice me to play the game, were it not for my knowledge of there being another layer hidden beneath. That's the key here. The meta stuff isn't the sole component of this game. It's auxiliary to a genuinely exceptional game that helps to elevate an already fantastic and cohesive experience rather than dragging a mediocre one up slightly. I can't sing this game's praises enough. I really can't, but I still don't think it's the best indie game ever. It's definitely up there, but long-time viewers will know what my favourite indie game of all time is. It's the perfect Spiritfarer. If you've never heard of Spiritfarer, go watch my video on it, or just play it yourself. I promise you that you won't regret it, and you'll come out of it with a new lease of life. I can guarantee it, I swear. But enough about Spiritfarer. I could talk about Spiritfarer for ages. This is Inscryption, and Inscryption is fantastic. But that's all for today. If you enjoyed the video, then please consider leaving a like, because that would greatly help me out. And if you want to see more videos from me, then you could always consider subscribing, as I upload every single Monday. But that's all for me. Have a nice day, and goodbye.